Welcome to another night at the York County History Center. Tonight is the Writers Roundtable. We are a group of local historians, researchers, and writers who get together and share, collaborate, and just try to support one another. Tonight's program will have Bryan Wade talk about his Keystone oral histories and the new curriculum that is going out all over the state. But before we do that, we are going to have some updates from the History Center, as well as some of our local historians here share about their most recent endeavors. So if you are here to watch Bryan Wade, he will start at 7:15. So join us right now for an update from Nicole Smith to talk about the History Center and some updates.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. If you're watching from home, please type any questions you have in the chat or comments. This video is also being recorded. Well, the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the York County History Center YouTube channel. A couple of upcoming events you might be interested in here. We have the South Central Pennsylvania Genealogy Society program on this Sunday. Will be Brad Amig speaking about 18th century gunsmithing in Eastern Pennsylvania. Our second Saturday program is March 12th, and that's Kim Hoagman speaking about the Yorktown Hotel project. Our Civil War Roundtable program is March 16th. Webinar, Ronald Coddington speaking on Faces of Civil War Nurses. Third Thursday webinar this month is March 17th, and that is Sandra Stockton speaking out about her book, Surviving Unpredictability. And then our All Vets speaker on March 23rd is Bob Zimmerman. We have other programs you might be interested in. We have a new online book club and things for families and children, homeschool days, and history makers workshops. To learn more about our programs, please visit yorkhistorycenter.org. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jim McClure, and I always like to do this segment here where we have members come up and tell us about their projects, and that's really an exciting part of the evening, is to try to find out what's going on out there. So, you know, anybody want to be the first one to come up? Charlie Stanball.
Hello, I'm Charles Stanball. I'm the president and founder of NECHIP, which is Northeastern York County History and Preservation. We have a number of things going on. This month, we partner with the York Library System, and we're going to have another Zoom presentation. This will be our 9th one. Scott Mingus is going to speak on his new book that he just released. It's Carnival of Grief. It's about the Lincoln funeral train that went through Pennsylvania. And that would be on March 28th at 6:30. And presently, the library isn't open for that. It may change, and I'll let you know, but it'll be on Zoom. You can check it out on our website, nechip.com. And then in April 23rd, we're going to have Dine with History. We tried this 2 years ago, but COVID came. And we're going to have, it's going to be at Shady Lane in Manchester. We're going to have tours of the facility. We're going to have Mission Barbecue Buffet. We're going to have a showcase for various history groups. If you have a history group and you'd like to have a table to show off your group, you're more than welcome to have it, and be a great way to people see your group. And we'll also have an auction, 78 items. We're going to have auction off the historical books, historical items. I have a piece of the deck of the New Jersey battleship to auction off. We have all kinds of items that you can bid on there. And like I said, and also too, I'm going to do a presentation on the blind trail that was there at one time. And we can do history groups for you, presentations for you. I have a couple of them lined up. And the one that Jim Ford talked about was the Forest Park that my father did a couple years ago. listening to Jim McClure, and I could do that presentation at your location as well. So thank you very much. And again, the website is NEYCHIP, NEYCHIP.com. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. You almost got Scott and me mixed up there for a second. Gave me a little jolt, except that would work in my favor, believe me, not his. Who else would like to give a pitch? Yeah, Stephen Smith.
I have two items. First of all, in April 13th, I'll be doing one room or early schooling in Spring Township. And we got permission from the Glades Schoolhouse, which is an auction house now up in the Glades. And we'll be having it there on April 13th at 7 o'clock in the evening. And the second event is in May, Memorial Day. There'll be an event honoring George A. Wood, who is the only African-American killed in action in World War I from York County. That will be at the Gold Star Garden out in Memorial Park. And he will be presented posthumously the Purple Heart, which his great nephew, Bill Armstrong, spent a good deal of time getting. So that will be coming up again, Memorial Day.
Thank you, Stephen. Yep. That, if you want to know where Glades is, go to the 7 Gates of Hell and then head, south, right? Glades is out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a beautiful area. Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Tom Yingling.
Hi, I'm Tom Yingling with the Cadores Valley Area Historical Society. We're located in Jefferson in York County, just south of Spring Grove, and we cover Cadores Township, North Cadores Township, Heidelberg, Manheim, and Springfield Townships and the communities within. But basically, as far as what we have going, other than we have a Facebook page, which has been quite active and been enjoying that. So you can come visit us on our Facebook page, Friends of the Cadores Valley Area Historical Society. We're also just wrapping up our reorganization that we started. I won't say wrapping up, but making some major headway. Reorganizing our history room that we have in the borough building where we're located at 48 Baltimore Street. So hopefully this weekend we'll have that in a position for our first meeting of the year, which will be on March 8th. We're doing a show and tell. Particularly, a particular interest will be cast iron animals. If people want to bring an item to show and tell, they can bring anything. But I'm interested in seeing a lot of the foundries around York County, small foundries, when they were finished the run for the day and they had some cast iron left over, they would pour a couple of these small animals that people would use for door stops or just put on their mantles or whatever. And I found it really interesting. And I know of a cat and a frog. That frog's real popular, but just interested to see what is the variety. So it's sort of a beginning of an investigation. What is it these foundries actually produced in these little animals? And also on April the 12th, we're going to have Jim McClure visit us, and he's going to speak on where North meets South, how York County's geography helped shape us. And again, both of these are in person at 48 Baltimore Street in Jefferson. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Anybody else? Tom will be giving the program, coming up in the Writers Roundtable in June. Tom will talk about that later.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dominic Miller, and I founded and I run Preserving the History of Newburytown. So we have a website, an Instagram page, a YouTube channel, and a website. So please check us out, Preserving the History of Newburytown. I will be doing a talk at the Spring Grove Historical Society on March 15th about women in the Civil War. I'm also a Civil War reenactor. I'm also helping plan the Memorial Day Parade for Newbury Township. So that'll happen Memorial Day weekend. We do a little parade. And if you or your business would be interested in joining us and participating, please contact us. And I'm also involved with Jamie, who will be speaking tonight. And we have a video series called Hometown History. You can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. And we just launched some merchandise and it supports preserving history. So thank you.
Did you picture Spring Grove? I might have missed it.
Yeah, that was the first
Okay,
thing I
okay,
said. March 15th.
I just wanted to mention kind of a fun project that I'm working on. My daughter is a swimmer with the York Synchronized Swim Team, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's kind of an amazing family, multi-generational family project. And we have all these pictures, and on August 7th, we're hoping to bring together alumni athletes from all of those years, or at least most of them, to the Camp Canadian for the YWCA. So if Hometown History would like to come and interview some folks, I just wanted to mention it. And I'm, as usual, also working on 47 other different projects. But, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody? I usually like to embarrass Rebecca, but I won't do that tonight. I resign myself not to do that. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Jamie.
So for tonight's main program, we're going to start with Bryan Wade. He's going to go over Keystone Oral Histories, and then we're going to trade off, and I'm going to teach one of the lessons from Keystone Oral Histories on Calvin Rice. So a little bit about Bryan Wade. He's the executive director and executive producer for Keystone Oral Histories. He originally is from Harrisburg, but he has taught down here in New York as an educator for a number of years. He was also a government official and a talk show host for over 20 years on radio, television, and a documentary production experience. One thing that Bryan is very excited about is informing and educating the upcoming future generations on specifically African-American history and the wide range of oral history documentaries that are out there. So welcome, Bryan.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you I've known and some I just met tonight. I was sitting over there. He said, "Oh, how are you doing?" I'm thinking, "Yes, how are you?" I said, "Who are you?" Becky answered. I said, "Oh," I jumped straight up because we talked over the phone, and she's been quite a contributor to the Keystones Oral History series and her work with, Lebanon Cemetery. But, I want to speak extemporaneously, though, within the context of my presentation. I want to say up front that this truly has been a county collaboration from day one. I would not have been able to do this without the help, the insight, the expertise, the rigor of several individuals. Some are in this building and in this room. Jim McClure, he's known me for years. I produced a television series years ago called Worlds Apart. It examined the issue of race in America. The premise of the program primarily looking at social constructs, myths, and stereotypes. For instance, the concept of race is very ingrained in our society, but if you study the origins of the concept of race, it's a social construct. So my rigor and some of my academic pedigree has been to look at deconstructing a lot of that misinformation that still in some ways plagues our society today relative to the issue of race. It took me to Stanford University, Harvard, Morehouse College School of Medicine, where I met with some of the top professors in the country, where we looked at genetics and race, intelligence and race, and things of that regard. I'm a former educator. I taught in Harrisburg, York, and also in North Carolina. I served in 2 branches of the military, the United States Navy and the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. I'm the father of 3 and just had another grandson, so that's 7 grandsons, 1 granddaughter. And I'm just privileged to be here. I really am. I just left another presentation with PCN. We did a presentation over at the Lincoln Charter School. They've implemented the curriculum, and some of the other schools have just come on board. And we're appreciative they're having great success with the curriculum, and the teachers are excited, the students are excited. And so it's been a journey. And to think that you go from a concept, because I did this in Harrisburg in 2017, that was really the result of, for some of you that watch movies or are in the military, there was a movie called We Were Soldiers, and it starred Mel Gibson. And that movie took place, basically looked at the first air cav and how they transitioned and used particular air strategies to drop troops in specific landing zones. And the first time they really had a full chance to use that was in the Grand Valley in 1965 in November. That was the first major battle that the military had in Vietnam. And at the end of the movie, the credits were running and it showed about the individuals that died in that battle. And I'm from Harrisburg, so credit, I saw Samuel M. McDonald, Harrisburg. So being a former educator, I was thinking something needs to be done to, on a local level, to highlight these histories about African Americans. I can give you an example. This gentleman right here, you may have heard the name. His name is Bishop Nathan Baxter. He's the bishop in the Episcopal Church. He served in Vietnam. He was a medic. He said he didn't want to carry a weapon. It was almost like that Hacksaw Ridge. I forgot the guy's name, or last name, but he served in Vietnam and he came back and he ultimately became the first African American to be dean of the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. So there's such a rich history here, and I knew as an educator that there wasn't much in the way of African American curriculum in schools specifically, and structured African American. They might pull up something, you know, oh, let's do a lesson plan on Martin Luther King, or you know, we'll do a march and things like that. But to have a structured curriculum that met state standards, I wasn't aware of, and there might have been some out there. One thing I am aware of, that no one's doing the combination of a documentary that's aligned with the curriculum in the United States, as far as I know. So that was my mission, and I started that off in Dauphin County. And then my professional career here was here in York, though. I'm just providing some backdrop or context for those of you that don't know me. And I taught here, I raised my family here, and eventually created the television program. And then I left the area, and then I came back and I met with Terry Gendron. He's the head of the Veterans Affairs Department. And I showed him the body of work that I had done in Dauphin County. She said, Bryan, I really want to bring this here to York. And the story of the lesson plan you're going to be seeing was really the result of Terry Gendron saying, Bryan, but in that documentary, you must promise me that Calvin Rice will be in the documentary. And I promised him that he would be, and he was. And here, this is just another iteration of that birth, talking about Calvin Rice again as a lesson. So when the Dr. Kinsley said that she was doing Calvin Rice, I almost jumped out of my seat. I said, oh my goodness. I said, the Veterans Affairs Department, they'll love that, you know, because it was something they were very ardent about, that they wanted to highlight Calvin Rice. But the journey was one that, as I always say, I didn't have 1 cent to rub against another to create that, but I'm a person of faith. And a lot of people knew me in York, and they knew my background, and they knew that Bryan says he's going to do something. He does it, and he does it with integrity. And so I reached out to some of the business people here in York County, and they were responsible for making this happen. So this is truly, again, and I don't say that just to say something, this wouldn't have happened if it had not been for the collective efforts of York County, and black, white, green, and blue. It was a collective, and I have no problem saying that. Well, this is a black guy. No, well, it's a document that happens to highlight a particular ethnic group in York County. But this was a collective, so you can give yourself a hand. How many people stand up? Anybody that was involved in the creation of that documentary, please stand up. That's in here. Becky, stand up. Yes, thanks so much. So also Scott Mingus was involved in the documentary. We did some of the filming right here, as a matter of fact. So I was all over York County. And I tell people, you know, I said, man, you did some scholarly work. I said, I had a lot of other people that did the scholarly work. I just sort of basically amalgamized it or put it together in a hopefully a cohesive format. And so it's been a journey. I'm going to get to this, but I just wanted to speak from the heart. You know, I could go slide 1, slide 2, but I wanted you to feel from my heart and thank all of you that took part in this. And to know that we're hopeful to start the next documentary. We have to raise money. These aren't cheap to do curriculum and documentary and things of that regard, the time, the filming, the whole bit. So hopefully we'll be able to raise more money. One of the things we're trying to do is to be able to get the curriculum through some of the other schools in York County, even in the midst of CRT. I changed that around for me. I call it historic human behavior. I don't call it CRT, because ultimately we're looking at how we interact with each other, regardless to black, white, green, or blue, and how do we do better as people, as humans. We're part of the human family. And the sooner we get to the place where we can deconstruct and divide people based on color, and see them as humans and treat them as humans, most of us would say we're probably Christians. We need to do a better job, and starting with me. So thank you again for coming out this evening, and I'll start the presentation. Well, I guess we'll start off with this video that will set some context for what we're doing. Some of you may have seen it, some maybe not, but I want to.
And that's for video. This is not it?
That's why I leave the
Oh, no,
technology
I think it
alone.
is this one. I think it's this. Yeah, I think it's this one.
That particular song, and I don't
My
mean
name
it
is
literally.
Amelia Chambliss.
Oh,
I'm
awesome.
a local
Okay.
artist and a community historian. Casting Shadows is a series of paintings that I did that featured some of York's Black history, and it focused on the positive aspects of it. One of the paintings that I did as a part of that series was that of Aquila Wilson. The important part of that painting, it wasn't your traditional portrait, was that in the photograph that I was using as reference, he had on some medals. And it was important to me to make sure that I really represented those medals. So rather than paint them and the vagueness of how they were represented in that photograph, I did some research to find out what those medals actually stood for.
I got a better feel for what he did in the military for some letters that the United States Army sent to my grandmother in relationships to his death and her being eligible for his burial insurance and a pension. And from that, I kind of got invigorated to do some research. I was talking with a young lady, and I thought he was buried in Lebanon Cemetery because of the fact back in that period of time, African Americans weren't buried in other than Lebanon Cemetery. Come to find out through the article that Stephen wrote, he was buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery.
Being the first African-American mayor for the city of York in South Central Pennsylvania came with its challenges though. Even while campaigning, we heard ugly words hurled at us. People said they would never vote for then or in the city of York. So, you know, it wasn't without its hiccups.
Thank you. Again, that's just an overview or just a short synopsis of some of the individuals that were in the documentary. The first video you saw, I want to play Jeopardy a little bit. When you heard that song that was a tribute, does anybody know that song? The name of that song that was being played? Raise your hand, please. Who knows that song? Sir. Abide with me. Abide with me. Having been in the military, I know a lot of times there would be certain songs, ceremonial songs you would play to tribute. And that was one that I have very fond memory of at times attending certain military ceremonies. And there's another one, not Abide with me. They play it at funerals. I'm trying to think of, it's slipping my mind now. I know it was in the movie with the submarine when it went to Alabama. I can't think of that song now. But anyway, let's go. This gentleman, anybody know who that was? His name's up there. Anybody know anything about this gentleman besides the people that helped me with this? Anybody know it? That's John Aquila Wilson. He was, and James was highlighted. Ms. McClure was highlighted. And I said, James, it's John. He said James in the documentary and I didn't catch it. I said, oh my goodness, but it's John Aquila Wilson. He's from Woodbine, Pennsylvania, in southern York County, and served during the Civil War, and he was also responsible for digging some of the ditches or parapets around the Wrightsville Bridge to impede the progress of the Confederate Army. And I didn't realize this, and I heard Scott Mingus give a presentation. That was one of the, if not one of the longest bridges supposedly in the world. Those two bridges, the Wrightsville Bridge and also the bridge in Harrisburg. The two bridges, Scott gave a presentation. I did not know that. But those bridges were the longest. I know he said in the United States, if not the world at the time. But John Quill was, he lived to be 101 years old, was the oldest Civil War veteran to live from York County. Go to the next slide, please. William C. Goodrich. Scott Mingus also was highlighted in this, although he wasn't in the military. I wanted to sort of contextually, and I was asking Scott questions about, well, of the individuals that were in the Underground Railroad, African Americans, or whatever term you want to use, that came out from the South, do we have any idea or any record how many of them probably joined the United States Colored Troops? And Scott couldn't give me any kind of concrete number, and I still haven't found even an estimate. Has anybody heard any general estimates about 10%, 20% of the African American men that got through the Underground Railroad? How many of them? I would assume quite a bit, but I wasn't able to come up with any concrete numbers about that at all. But as you well know, William Goodrich was a businessman. He's lived here in York. I don't know how many years, but I know he left after a period of time and was in Minnesota, I believe, moved to Minnesota. And I think his son came to Glen Allen.
Glen Allen.
Yeah, Glen Allen, I'm sorry. So we highlighted William Goodrich, but it was Kelly Summerford, who was, I guess, the curator for the Goodrich Center. We highlighted him, but it was in the context of the Underground Railroad. Next slide, please. There's George A. Wood. I know there were some differences about George A. Wood Jr., George Wood, and we went through all of those machinations. But we're glad to hear that. I think after 104 years, he's finally being conferred his Purple Heart that he should have had a long time ago. Served in World War I and was killed in France. And it was great. Matter of fact, we did the planning session for him right here in this room. And the interesting thing, the students from York College actually did this section of the documentary. We had met with several students from York College that were, in film studies, and this was their work. They did a great job. So Keystones has always been very collaborative in terms of trying to bring various elements of the community together. So they did an outstanding job. So I want to give them credit for where credit's due. Next slide, please. It's a long-standing family here in York County, York City, the Kirkland family. They've served several generations in the military, and one of the prominent historians here in New York is Jeff Kirkland, who's in the documentary. But we highlighted their family. Let's go to the next slide, please. Bonnie Grimes. Bonnie Grimes, I knew for years, and he had an illustrious career here in New York, in terms of his work in different communities. He was beloved by all. He could cut through in many barriers, whether it's political, corporate, whatever. He knew how to do that. And that's a specific skill set to be able to do that. But he was beloved by all. Matter of fact, the first version or the first iteration of the Keystones Military Hall of Fame, he was inducted posthumously into the Hall of Fame in 2018. We did that at the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. PCM covered that. And he was one of the inductees, which covered South Central. So we had some from Lancaster, Harrisburg, York. But a beloved man. And one of the things it was very moving. After he passed, his wife had moved to North Carolina. I was able to go to North Carolina because for that particular iteration of inductees, I had a world-class artist paint portraits of each of them. I was able to go to North Carolina because God kept pressing me, get down there to see her, get down there to see her. My mother lives in Greensboro, so she was only like 50 miles away, further south. So I took the print and presented it to her, and I did a little Facebook thing about it. And a month and a half after I presented it, she passed. So I knew that inkling, that urging was, direct me. I didn't know she would pass like that, but she passed away, and it was. I almost choke up just thinking about it. But I'm glad I did listen to that voice and get that to her. So Bonnie Grimes, thank you. Next, William Lee Smallwood. His family was over at the charter school today talking about you know, his work. They've implemented the curriculum and they highlighted William Smallwood and also Leon Gilbert. I don't know many of you know that story, that he was an officer over in Korea and got court-martialed, and it wasn't really nice. They're still fighting to have his rulings overturned, but he was serving over there and he was put in a bad situation, and eventually he was court-martialed. Although the men that was with him, they supported him and they said he did the right thing, you know, and it just has been talked about internationally. It's not only in the United States, but Leon. And I knew him and went to church with him, and he never talked to me about his military past. I knew a very quiet, unassuming person, you know, had a deep, short voice, I mean, soft voice. And I didn't even know he was in the military, but he was always a gracious gentleman. So the Smallwood family, they had a chance to talk about, after one of the teachers, Mrs. Shantae Reese Smith, she gave an overview about how they implemented the curriculum. Their students over there have actually done Zoom sessions interviewing family members. They interviewed the Smallwoods family. And so they sort of didn't necessarily follow the letter of the law, but they were very creative in terms of how they introduced the curriculum to the students. And now that was the 5th grade. The 6th grade students saw that and said, when we want to do it, we want to get it, we want to do this, we want to do this. So it's great to see how teachers can, you know, yes, you have the letter of the law, and I'm going to talk briefly about the framework around the curriculum, but there's a spirit to that sense of, to that history. And they brought that spirit to life over at Lincoln Charter School. So we're hoping to keep track of the different schools that implement it. And I even thought about this, and I'll probably have some of y'all as judges, that we might have some kind of historic beat around this thing where we bring some of the high schools together or the middle schools together, and we'll, you know, have them present, and we'll have judges and that type of thing. But that's just in the future. I'm always thinking, I'm saying, oh Lord, now I got to raise money for this or whatever. But you know, it comes to pass. But I was thinking about that. But you know, I think it's important that we get to these because they don't know their history. You know, they really don't. Not only just African Americans, you have Latino Americans. I'm hoping to do a Latino oral history. I definitely am. I've been working with the Hanover community about some things that they're looking to do down there. You know, I'll give, you know, Gettysburg always gets the press and the, you know, the hype. I said, well, y'all have a heck of a history yourself. If it hadn't been for Hanover, the outcome of that particular battle might have been different. Or surrounding Jeb Stuart, but I won't get into all of that. Mr. Smith, I'm sure to talk about that. But anyway, we'll go to the next one, please. There's Calvin Rice, and Dr. Kinsley will be giving that presentation. And I don't know, it's just sometimes you can never project how something will grow. And again, it's because of the goodwill of people like all of you in here that has made this go in ways I could have never thought of, you know, but people are willingly wanting to be a part and say, how can I help? And I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. I really am. Next, please. This is Sandra Stockton. She'll be one of your speakers here. Jeff Kirkland made me, I didn't know her, you know, and I lived in New York for over 30 years, but she had left a long time. And, but she attained the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Army, and growing up, it wasn't the easiest of times for her, you know, but she persevered and travailed. And Jeff Kirkley said, and she was inducted into our last Keystones Military Hall of Fame. And that was all African-American females. So I'm always mindful about the ladies. I'm always mindful about the ladies. You always see it in any of my literature, there will all be a balance between the men and the women. But she has done some great work. And I think this is her 2nd book that she just released, Jim, is that correct? That's correct. Yeah, 2nd book. So matter of fact, I went to Maryland to present her award because we couldn't have a ceremony because COVID had just hit. I was filming right in the midst of COVID, and we were fortunate no one got infected or anything like that. So it's been an interesting journey. Sandra Stockton, next please. Minnie Green. Now some may know her, but she's one of those worker bees that's always behind the scenes working. She was in the military in different iterations, either reserves or whatever, for close to 40 years. And she got called up from the reserves to go over to Iraq and places like that, but she sings with the Black Ministerial Choir. I've known her for as long as I can remember. She came from New York, though. She's not a native, but I knew of her work and creating that Hall of Fame. It wasn't always about the PhDs and the DEDs or whatever like that. It's about the people that, you know, are behind the scenes, that are the salt of the earth kinds of individuals. And I'm mindful of that. And I, you know, wanted me on Friday, I broke those class barriers that I tried to be balanced about acknowledging individual service. So she was inducted, and she's a heck of a lady, and she just works very hard in our community. Next, please. But what can I say about Kim Bracey? I think we all know her. She served in the United States Air Force for 10 years, and I thought it would be fitting. She was inducted into the Keystones Hall of Fame too, in terms of her service. Not only, and it's not just military service, community service too. So it's a combination of both military and community service. So I thank her for her service and to this community. Next, please. Okay, so we're getting ready to go into the curriculum now. This was a video that I did with Dr. Kinsley and Sherry Washington, and also Dr. Scott Disley. So I never thought it would be in this iteration though, you know, where I'm doing it in presentations. I just thought it would be a good teaser to lead into making people aware of the curriculum. So at this time, we'll just run this teaser.
When we talk about curriculum and we talk about relevance, it's important that our students have the background knowledge and can connect to the curriculum. They can see themselves in that curriculum. The hope is that when we're including this piece, that our young people can connect and say, hey, isn't that my relative? Or hey, isn't that my friend's relative?
So being able to see people who are like us in the stories that we're telling, to see people who are neighbors, people who we might bump into down the street, is important for people to make connections so that they can understand how those lessons relate to them.
When we fail to include underrepresented voices, our students do not have an opportunity to receive from the advantage point of other perspective. When you give kids an opportunity to learn about all people and how they all contributed, it really gives them a chance to look inwardly at themselves and then build that empathy.
It's not just designed for a high school or a traditional public school, private school, a Catholic school, private academy, a charter school. You'll be able to use this curriculum. If you work in the community center, an after school program, or the library system, this curriculum is versatile. The ideal is to really use this curriculum to get our students to connect to history, but to also understand the significant relevance of the African American experience here in York County.
If I had, now I'll get into Common Core and all that kind of, and I'm just going to give a general overview. But if we really wanted to get the heart of what the curriculum is, it's about helping students to connect through various, we use the word pedagogy, various styles of teaching and getting that information to them. But that's what it's about, helping students connect, not only the particular ethnic group, but what I'm seeing at Lincoln Charter School, all those students are very interested about. That's why I'm committed to doing a Latino oral history, so it can be diverse and inclusive. Because it's just not, you have Native American history, you have LGBTQ, you have a lot of different component parts that we should be mindful. I know we have aversions about certain things but people need a sense of belonging. And for too long here in the United States, and I don't make any excuses, we haven't been as inclusive in terms of a holistic representation of our history. And that's one thing Keystones is trying to do. I just left the session. There's another organization called Black History 365. They're doing this on a national level, and they're having great success. Matter of fact, they're in over 125 school districts in the United States and 14 colleges and universities. They're also in the state of Texas. Now, most of us know Texas is a very conservative state. They're in 20, and most of them school districts are not inner city. They're white, predominantly white. So it's interesting. I think it's how it's presented, and I've had to be honest, their curriculum is much more probative than Keystones. It really goes into the transatlantic slave trade, but they're very scholarly, and it's not a malicious attempt to denigrate any particular ethnic group other than to share our history. And I think as educators, and I know there's some in this room, they want to be able to teach history unadulterated, but tastefully. And that's part of the growing pains we're going through now here in not only York County, but the United States. But again, I think that, as they say, politics is local. I believe that when we can bring the history and make it local, because any community, just like York, and York should be very proud. I think you're the bit of helping to pull together a curriculum and documentary combination that no one else is doing in the United States. And you would think York County, you should be proud of yourselves. I know I am. And anytime I present, I always say it was a collective effort by good people in York County. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. 95% of the money that came from people like the Powder Mill Foundation. You could say white entities, but I'm just going to give their names: Powder Mill, York County Community Foundation, Shipley Energy, the York County Veterans Associations Affairs, AARP, York College of Pennsylvania. I'm an alum there. So all those people, I think they knew me and they trusted me. They trusted me because they know that I would do what I said I did. And again, you helped me do that. You helped me do that. And again, I'm always appreciative of it. Thank you so much. All right, now, this is the letter of the law. You know, you hear all these standards here and standards there, but for vetting purposes, if I was going to bring a curriculum to a school district, they have people that are highly trained, like Dr. Kinsley, that could look at a curriculum and say, okay, does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? Does it have this? We made sure that it met what they call Pennsylvania Common Core standards, National Common Core standards, standards for social studies. It's been vetted by several superintendents. Dr. Scott Dicey, who you saw in the video, he sent me a letter. And basically, in short, he said that this curriculum is superior. Now, is it perfect? Could there have been more done to it? But for this first attempt, he rated the curriculum as superior. So I want to thank Dr. Dicey, but we wanted to make sure that we had reasonable, standards and rigor that was done in the development of the curriculum. Next, please. I'm not going to read all of that, but again, the curriculum overview is basically highlighting African Americans that served in the military from the Civil War to Vietnam or beyond Vietnam. And it's about rigorous approaches on how just to not only talk about, okay, they did this, they did that, and just regurgitating information, setting up modalities in which students can really take deep dives with their teachers and really do good rigor, good research that provides substantive learning in the classroom. And we were mindful of that. So that's basically what all this stuff is saying. But it's a resource too for growing and understanding. I can read it, but I want to speak from my heart about what this represents. I don't want to read it verbatim because anybody could do that, but that's what this means for me. Next, please. The curriculum map. Now this gets into and Dr. Kinsley has done a great job in integrating the curriculum map into her lesson plan. And she'll go into more detail about that. I'm doing a surface dive. She's going to do a deep dive. But the curriculum map is very important in terms of that C3 framework. That C3 framework basically highlights literacy, history, social studies, college career, and civic life. And that's a very important part of any reputable curriculum. So we made sure that we had, and Dr. Washington was the designer of the curriculum. So she specializes in that. So we wanted to make sure, and she made sure that we had those standards in place. Next, please. This is just an overview of the framework or the structure of the standards in C3. And you see right there, college, career, and civic. So those are the 3 C's really. College, career, and civic life, the framework for social study and state standard. And that's generally an overview of what all that represents. I'm not going to read all that verbatim. Next, please. Curriculum maps. You know what a map is. A map basically gives you direction as far as where to go and how to get there. So let's go to the next page, please. These are the modules, or some people say chapters, and there's several modules or chapters. In the chapter 1, we look at African American cemeteries. The topics within that module: Pottersfield, Basil Biggs, a lot of history in Hanover about Basil Biggs, correct? Lebanon Cemetery. And it goes into the module description, the learning objectives. John Fuller Wilson, Civil War veteran, Wrightsville Bridge. Ophelia Chambers, her work in Casting Shadows, where she goes into delineation about what those medals really represented. You see the medals, but she wanted to bring them out and unearth them and provide you a context for what they actually represented. So each of the modules or chapters are set up like this. Next please. Scopes and sequence. This is the inquiry design model. Inquiry design is the shift from studying to doing. I could tell you this is a microphone and show you that, but until you get it and you start to work with it or use it, or an iPad, you can tell a student, okay, if you do this and do that, but until they can touch it and feel it and work it, that takes that learning now from just talking about it to making it real. Oh, that's how that works. That exploration, that hands-on. That's what really this is all about. Not only just talking about it, writing a note, it's digging deep and going through that process. That's what brings us to life. That's what I call the spirit of the law. You have the letter of the law, but when these students, and I'm seeing that, you know, over at Lincoln Charter School, just the joy that they have, they were even talking, when she gave a presentation, the students were even talking about it in interviews of what it meant to them, to be able to see themselves. That's what Dr. Disley talked about. That's what Dr. Kinsley talks about. Students being able to see themselves. All right, next please. The Danielson lesson plan, oh, next please, I'm sorry. Oh, Danielson lesson plan form. As I was talking to Dr. Kinsley and Kinsley, I'm sorry, getting them mixed up, about the Danielson lesson plan format. This is something that's pretty prevalent in the state of Pennsylvania. I wasn't sure if it was nationwide, but it's basically a framework that makes sure that we meet all these standards. That, you know, it lays it out. You can show the next page, then, please. It has all the components of what they need to focus on students, language objectives, PA Common Core, and it lists the particular areas that it aligns. So this is a very comprehensive way of making sure that we're doing what the map says. We're making sure that all those component parts are part of the lesson plan. It's very well detailed and outlined. Next, please. Other information, there's also research links. Look at the assessments, independent practice activity, guided practice, introduction, short lecture, and development. And so it's very holistic and expansive in its approach. Dr. Kinsley, you'll see that now from the theoretical to the practical when she comes up and gives her presentation. That makes it real. You know, I can talk about this, but until you actually go through the rigor of what that represents. How am I doing for time? Okay.
You're doing fine.
Okay, I don't
You're doing perfect.
want to have y'all falling asleep on me. But anyway, next, please. And here we go, resource materials. And then also research links. So it takes the lesson just beyond what she's talking about, but you can research further. You go to links. Some have more links than others, but teachers can, you know, when they do their own research, I know Dr. Kinsley knows this, there can be several. And this community has done great work through the various blogs. I mean, there's so much information about a lot of these people, individuals, places. Your county, I don't know if we get enough credit for it, but man, there's so much scholarship here. It really is. So there's a plethora of information that can be used to develop curriculum here. If I'm looking at doing the history of African-American educators, businessmen. I'd like to do a 13-part series, but I don't know. So I might do an amalgam. I might do a documentary that has business, preachers, teachers, you know, so they get a sample, and then there'll be more research links to where they can do that. I think that might be a good amalgam to do that. And so they have a plethora then versus just one street, but they'll have samples of each of those particular areas. So this Danielson model, I think, is it's a good process. So I think, let's see what happens. That's it. So at this time, I'm going to bring my tag team partner, Dr. Kinsley. And when she showed me this, I like to jump through the roof. I said, oh my goodness. I said, this is outstanding. I use the word magnificent. She's done a great job to turn this around. And we're going to make sure that the York County Veterans Affairs, because it was there, it's funny how God works. That was the first thing they said to me, we want Calvin Rice. And here she does a whole lesson plan about Calvin Rice. So at this time, without further ado, Dr. Kinsley.
Thank you, Bryan.
Yep.
So when I was looking through, so thank you, Bryan. I thought he did a really good job going through what to expect if you open up the curriculum. And so I went through and looked through the modules, and I decided that I wanted to do Calvin Rice. And so a lot of my information, almost all of my information, comes from the curriculum map that he uses. So Calvin Rice, he's described as an honorable veteran who sacrificed his life, and this comes from Module 9 of Keystone Oral Histories, and it's called The Ultimate Sacrifice. So when I go through my lesson today, I'm going to have 4 different steps. The first part is I'm going to break down the curriculum map, like from a teacher's perspective. Then we'll dive into the lesson where I'll ask the compelling question. This will require you at home and in the audience to participate. So hopefully you have your phones available and online ready to click on some links to contribute. Then I'll have a mini lecture giving some background information on Calvin Rice, and then finish with the lesson takeaways, summarizing his contributions to York County history. So here's an example of what the curriculum map would look like. First, you can see it in the top right. This is module 9, the ultimate sacrifice. Then as a teacher, I'm looking at the big idea. What do I want my students to walk away with knowing? And same with that compelling question over there. The whole purpose of the compelling question is to get the kids to think. It's the inquiry design model, asking questions, and then it builds that curiosity. It's almost like we're salespeople up here trying to pitch and motivate to the kids, like, here's why you should care. Here's why it matters to you. And the compelling question hopefully gets them that spark of interest. Then we look at the description. The resources, of course, and Bryan put together and his team an awesome number of different resources for us teachers to use. And then the standards, of course, and then the bulk of the lesson, which are the supporting questions, because a lot of these lesson plans can be broken down into just more than one day. They can be 2 or even 3 days as well. So to start, everyone in the audience with your smart devices, if you could scan the QR code. If you're at home, Nicole is putting in a link to what's called a Padlet. So the compelling question is, why must one choose liberty or death? There are no right or wrong correct answers. We are looking for maybe 10-sentence summary. I'm sorry, not 10 sentences. Please don't write essays. 10-word summaries. 10 words to get you thinking personally about what liberty is, and then what death, and then why must we choose it? So if you're at home, what you'll do is hopefully the QR code will take you to this page right here. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's a plus sign. If you click on the plus sign, it will open up almost like a digital Post-it note. On that digital Post-it note is where you write a couple words. Why must one choose liberty or death? Oh yeah, I can go back.
I was able to get through.
The QR code would pick up on my phone.
Maybe they can give a verbal. Got it?
We'll give you another 20 to 30 seconds. There should be a little publish button or a submit. So this is nice for teachers. If you've never used this before, it's called Padlet.com. And it's just a digital Post-it note that allows students to respond. I do this as like a do now in the beginning of class. I'll have a warm-up question on the board. They go and answer the question. It's digital, it gets them centered in the classroom, focused on our discussion for the day. And it also allows them to read each other's responses, so it can be collaborative and reflective as well. So some of the things I see up there is that life without freedom is not worth living. Liberty and freedom are essential to being fully human. And because you want to die free, not under tyranny. So we wanted to start off with this question because it sets the tone to talk about Calvin Rice for today. So a little bit now about his backstory. So his name was Calvin Charles Rice. His dad was actually Calvin and he preferred to be called Charles. So that's why I have Charles Rice capitalized. He grew up on West Princess Street, and while he grew up in York County, he was really into playing the drums. So he played drums at his house, but then also for some local bands in the neighborhood. He attended William Penn, and then at 18 years old, he joined the military and he made this his career. Harold Redding, one of his friends, hopefully you're watching today, he was quoted as saying, he was an easygoing guy, always willing to help others. He was just the kind of guy that whenever you asked him for help, he'd do it. He was just not a self-centered person. He would have done anything for anyone. By showing quotes like this, it humanizes our characters. They were real people that were alive and that were a part of our community. They're not just somebody in a textbook that existed far away in some other land, like they were right here and they went to our own schools. So if you're interested in learning more, I'm going to keep going on about Calvin Rice, Charles Calvin Rice. But here is more on him, the documentary. If you're interested in watching the Oral History School documentary, it is on PBS. This is just a screenshot of it. It's about an hour long. If you're interested specifically in Rice, then you want to start around minute 37. So Rice started his career in the military, and the first place he went was Germany. He was on Germany soil for a while, and then he came back to the United States. And then he left for Vietnam in October of 1968. When he left, he was just 21 years old, so extremely young. And he left a wife and then also a 4-year-old daughter behind. And he never did come home. So he died overseas while he was in Vietnam. That is him over there on the right-hand corner. He was only in Vietnam for 6 months. And his wife reported that he had been severely wounded after being ambushed while leading a patrol on June 15th near the Hobo Woods in South Vietnam. He died 10 days later from those wounds. When I was doing my research, I went to newspapers.com and I found this headline from the York Dispatch announcing his death. And I think this would be a time for, as a teacher, what you could do also is have your students, if you have a newspapers.com subscription, to go in and actually like see his obituary and see the headlines and read them for themselves. Again, it just makes it more real, so the kids can connect, like Bryan was saying. And he was buried with full military honors at Gettysburg National Cemetery. So thinking big picture here, Rice was one of 85 York Countyans who passed away over in Vietnam. That number was debatable. You can read about that online if you're interested. But a total of 58,222 Americans lost their lives in this conflict. When he died, he was considered a decorated soldier. He got the Bronze Star Medal with V for Valor, Army Recommendation Medal for V for Valor, and then a Purple Heart Medal. And if you want, on the rail trail, you can go and visit a bench that was dedicated to him and his honor. So fast forward to current day, here is Elmwood Woody Rice. He was Rice's brother, I believe, right? I think he was his brother. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, if you grew up in this era and you had your brother go and serve overseas, died at 22 years old, and he never came home, and you wonder what happened. You might hear the reports, but you're always curious. You have these medals, but he never really knew what happened to his brother. So it remained a mystery for decades. They never knew how he died completely, other than just he suffered severe wounds and he got these medals, and then he died 10 days later. So they had no idea what happened, but in their grief, it really didn't matter. He was gone. And then his daughter, Barbara, like I said, grew up without him, was 4 years old. And as years passed though, Elmwood said that we started to get curious. And years later, they wanted to know what happened to him. And so when they had the dedication ceremony for the flagpole at the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial at Penn Park, that's when Redding, his friend, and many others started really digging into the military records to uncover Calvin Charles Rice's legacy. So do you think they found out any information on him? Yes, they did. It took a lot of research and a lot of time. And then Mike Argento wrote an article on the findings. He said, it confirmed what they believed. The citations painted a portrait of a war hero. Other men were able to come home because he did not. So now, if I was in a classroom with my 9th and 10th graders, I would have a text analysis where we would look through the article and we would read it to practice our reading comprehension. I do have some copies of the excerpt here. So Mike Argento's article is long and very rich, full of detail, but for the purpose of class and tonight, I broke it down into just a 2-page summary of what happened to him while he was overseas. I'm gonna ask Bryan, if you don't mind, to pass a couple of the copies out. If you are at home, I took a PDF of this and plugged it into the slides. Nicole is going to be publishing them. So you can pull up the excerpt from Mike Argento's article to just read specifically what happened to him when he was over in Vietnam. And then you can read the entire article online at YDR as well. I'm not going to tell you what happened to him. You have to go and read. Teaser. So go practice your reading skills. If you're in the audience, congratulations, you have a copy. And at home, you obviously have access to a computer. So go read what happened to Mr. Rice. So this is where then again, like if I was actually teaching this in the classroom, that activity would probably take about 30 minutes and we would have a deep dive into it. But now, because we're nearing our time tonight, I wanted to just take a second and reflect on his contributions to York County history. But I think what I'll do, if you guys don't mind, I'll expand it into more of a larger reflection based off of the entire presentation for tonight. So if you had to pick one major contribution that African Americans made to the York County community based off of tonight's presentation, what is your biggest takeaway? If you're at home, throw it into the comments. If you're watching on Zoom, again, your biggest takeaway, African Americans' contribution to our history. And if you're here in person, let's get to know each other and turn and talk to your elbow partner. What's your biggest lesson from today? We've got about 2 minutes. Go ahead. Do you have any comments?
Exactly. It's almost like a suffocation. Framework to this. I could go put other military people and just be content. Right. Exactly. So doctors could still use that CE framework, the IBM, all that, and do that.
Well, that's interesting because this points out.
At about 10 more seconds.
Exactly.
In his life before he went.
Right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, So if you are watching on Facebook, Sam Dorm has been adding lots of comments and feedback. So go and watch or look at the comments and read. If you have any questions specifically for Bryan, you can reach him. His contact is on the slide. Did we have any closing thoughts, or Bryan, did you want to say anything to end our program for tonight?
Thank you, Dr. Kinsley. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I wanted to ask a pointed question. Now, you've seen a real deep dive around one of the lesson plans, and it was contextualized by Dr. Kinsley. When you see that, even in the midst, I'm gonna say this, CRT, do you feel threatened? Does this make you feel uncomfortable in terms of how, no, well, you know, a lot of people are saying that, oh, it's teaching hate and all this type of thing. Do you feel that? Do you sense that in this particular lesson plan? No. Somebody tell me, how was this presented? Do you think this is scholarly or reasonably scholarly work that should be in schools throughout York County? Okay. Well, what I'd like you to be now, commission you as disciples, go ye therefore into all the world, all the school districts, and preach the gospel on stuff. They're going to say heretic, heretic online and stuff like that. No, but please, if you live in certain school districts, please get the word out. We've been able to underwrite this for some school districts, primarily in the inner city. But you know, I know Red Lions, they're going to be incorporating it, and we present it out at Southwestern. And it was good. Biglerville was there, and some other individuals were there, and it was well received. But I guess in some situations, it just takes time. Some things weren't built overnight, but we hope that we can disseminate this throughout York County. And again, we want to do a Latino oral history. Anybody have any questions, specific questions of me though, relative to any questions online, or and if you have any questions, because some of you are meeting me for the first time. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was wondering, one of the things that I thought was great about this lesson from a perspective of a historian is that it gives the kids the opportunity to say, oh, well, just because there's only this amount of information that people knew at the time doesn't mean that there isn't more information out there. And the idea that you could look up and research those documentation. I was wondering, is that one of the objectives to teach students about the different ways they can do research?
Yes, because ultimately the question, please. Oh, come up and ask the question, please. I want to do her question justice. That was pretty long, and I don't want to be stumbling. No shame in my game.
I was just saying that as a historian, well, and a teacher, one of the things I loved about this lesson was that it showed that the amount of information that was known at the time by the family didn't demonstrate the full amount of information that was available, and that much later, when they went to try to dig that information out, they were able to find it through documents that reflected what they did know. And I was asking if that was one of the learning objectives of this curriculum, was to teach the students those history tools of what are the other resources they can go to.
Yes, that's one of the reasons for the research, and I think Dr. Kinsley was highlighting. And I think ultimately you want to be able to have the students be somewhat self-sustainable, where they're not just living off of every word that the teacher says. You set up these modules in such a way that they'll do their own research, they'll do their own writing. So they have a sense about ultimately how to do that themselves, so they're self-sustainable. So the next time they see something like this, they have the tools now. So, oh, we did this before, so I know about this person. I'll start researching things like that, and it creates this self-autonomy and their ability to contextualize in such a way that makes it real for them. Did I answer your question? Okay, yes, sir.
What age group is this geared to?
This lesson plan was geared more to the middle school age, Dr. Kinsley, but it can be what they call back math. And so this is really geared, it could be geared from K through 12. But one of the questions, seeing that this has been labeled a supplement, it's enough content in this curriculum that if you did this once a month or something like that, or twice, you can have that curriculum will last all year long. If you're only using it as separate, because of course the primary classes are math and writing and that type of thing. So if you would, because I did a Zoom session, Joan had set up, And one of the questions was about, can this be used in the after-school program? Yes, it's very flexible. It can be used in after-school programs and things in that regard. But it's up to each school in terms of how they contextualize and use it. Now, we can offer suggestions, but each school has a sort of different flavor of how they want to use it. So our goal is not to say micromanage it, but our goal is to say it's something to be considered. And now that you've seen a sample of it, please go back and let school districts know. And basically, you'll see the same kind of continuity throughout the whole curriculum. It's a snapshot of York County, but I think it's a great representation, male, female. And another thing about Calvert, I think he was the most decorated Vietnam veteran in York County to have passed, from what I've heard. The most decorated to have died in Vietnam for such a period of time. He's only there for 6 months. Yes, sir.
Is this just about York County?
Yes, that's why it's a regional approach. That was my concept, to come up with a regional approach using documentary and curriculum. So it's contextual to this region. You'll see in that first module, Basil Biggs, he's well known throughout York County, but in Hanover and around the Gettysburg, the Civil War, Basil Biggs did a lot of the exhumations of bodies and moving bodies here and that type of thing. He was a businessman too, and he was a part of the Underground Railroad. So he had a very expansive history. But yes, this is specific to York County. Can this be right to be contextualized, where Ms. Anstein talked about, you could really replace those figures, an individual, and put another one and still follow that model to just build your own skeleton or whatever around it. So it's very flexible in terms of its utility and its usage. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Is this model available to basically take it and do what you said?
Yes, it's for sale. That's one reason Keystones is putting out, because it's one thing to depend on grants and that type of thing. And eventually, if that's what you're depending on with all the competitive grants that people are writing in here, I think you'll soon burn out. So this is one way that if we're able to sell the curriculum, that we can continue to reinvest that money to do other documentaries and that type of thing. So, we haven't got it in all the schools, but we're hoping. And that's one reason I went to some of the foundations. I said, could you provide the seed money for some of these schools to get it, because their budgets aren't as robust as some of the other school districts. So I was able to do that. They were very generous, and they subsidized the curriculum for primarily because their mandate was York City. Let me be very specific about that. One of the reasons they did. They saw the work, they saw the scholarship from day one. They know I was expansive and inclusive, and they did that with no hesitation. Yes, sir.
Is there thought of expanding this to other areas of history?
Oh, yes. That's a good question. I said that earlier. My goal was to do a 13-part series with 13 different curriculum for each documentary. We're looking at now the history of African-American educators. The research has already been done. Research has already been done. I'm also thinking about doing an amalgam, because I have to look at, you think 13 curriculum, that's not cheap. That budget for the whole project is over $1 million. Believe me, it's not cheap. When you talk now, if I had curriculum specialists say, hey, look, I'll donate my time to do it, then whoop, that drops that way down. No hint, Dr. Kinsey. Dr. Kinsey has consented to come on board to work, just be a part of the curriculum team. But it costs, it really does. And so if I can get people that will say, I'll do it at a reduced rate, or if you know a foundation or something like that, or whatever, or a corporation, we're 501c3, and we also have certified through the state what they call education income tax credits. What that means is, if a corporation contributes money, they can write 90% of their income, their tax off of, if they say they gave $10,000, they can write 90% of that off. So we have, that's if they're signed up and certified with the state. So we have that, and we also had the 501c3. And we have accounting system, we have attorneys, so I think we run a good ship. I think we do. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Our organization is starting to work with the high school, getting the high school students involved with history. Before COVID, we were planning to make a video using school of one room schoolhouse.
Can I ask what school system that was?
Northeastern.
Northeastern, okay, yes.
Yes, and they are currently working with us, with my organization right now, with this Dine with History. And I think we're gonna be the only organization in the county that's giving a scholarship fund for people specifically going into history.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
So we're looking for people to help fund, keep on funding it. But
Okay.
We have money to do it this year, and we're gonna get our first scholarship this year.
That's
And
wonderful.
Like I said, the school, one of the school teachers is on our board,
Okay,
and so we're trying to do the next level up, high school students and those going to college, to get them interested in history.
I got the look from Jim McClure. I don't know if that's that teacher's
But
look.
look, what, can you summarize what he said about Northeastern?
Oh, that's right. He's basically saying that he's working, what's your name, sir?
Charles Stanball.
Charles Stanball is saying that in the Northeastern School District, they have a collaboration where they're working with students that are doing some of the videos or filming, correct?
Well, we were going to do filming through COVID.
Oh, you were too, okay.
Possibly start that up again.
And you also have, because of that, the student involvement, you're creating funding that will provide scholarships, correct?
That is correct, for those who are going to history.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Because I don't know how much time I have left. Because all the questions are coming from over here. Oh, can we get some over here? Can I get an amen on this side? Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and provide you firsthand insight in terms of the scholarship and the level of rigor that this curriculum has. And please go back and spread the word. I won't get into that whole preacher thing, but spread the word and let other school districts know that how impressed you were or whatever. I can't put words in your mouth, but that I think it could be a viable tool for their school districts, and we'd be more than willing to meet with them. And that's it. So thank you again for the invitation. And that's it.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great presentation. And thank you, Jamie, for your contribution. Thank you to everyone tonight that came. Our next Writers Roundtable meeting will be in June, and it'll be Tom Engling, who came up and spoke earlier, and he'll be talking about Southwestern York County history. So we hope you tune in June. Thank you, everybody.
Excellent. Excellent.